Hello, it's Tommy from CTMU Singularity. In this video, we'll be watching clips from Michael Knowles' interview with Christopher Langan, the man with the highest recorded IQ in America and the author of the Cognitive Theoretic Model of the Universe, a theory of everything which describes reality as a self-simulation occurring in the mind of God. Unfortunately, the interview was unexpectedly shelved by the Daily Wire. Let's jump right in.
What I read in these books.
Was there any field that attracted you in particular? I mentioned that I don't have anything past high school math, and even that I was pretty sketchy on. Math, physics, philosophy, theology.
Well, now when I was 14, I was working on a ranch in Wilsell, Montana, which is just across the bridges from Bozeman. I'm not familiar with Bozeman, but anyway, I was working as punching cows, stacking hay, irrigating on this ranch, and I took two books with me, and one of them was a book by Albert Einstein on the theory of relativity, and the other one was a book by Bertrand Russell. Okay, and I would read these books. I was living in a covered wagon. They call it a sheep wagon these days, but literally, I'm not kidding. I mean, that's what it was. You know, a kerosene lamp in a sheep wagon out in the middle of a field.
Reading Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein.
Reading Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein, and it occurred to me, these two things really need to be put together. And then, once I decided that, I started putting them together. And then I found out about Kurt Gödel and the undecidability theorem. And yes, absolutely. Okay, you see, because reality isn't just geometric, which is what Einstein thought it was, nor is it just linguistic. It's a blend of the two, right? Russell saw it as being linguistic. Einstein saw it as being geometric. Okay, so I decided that reality must be logico-geometric.
The CTMU is a confluence of many fields. As Langan mentions, the CTMU is a synthesis between the ideas of Bertrand Russell and Albert Einstein. Bertrand Russell viewed the world as a set of propositions and clusters of symbolic meaning in mathematics, language, formal logic. Essentially, reality consists in the view of Russell's analytic philosophy, not of things, but of facts in the analytic sense. Albert Einstein, in contrast, saw the world as geometric. You know about classical mechanics. There are certain laws which can predict the behavior of systems in motion. Well, Einstein, his special and general relativity, actually set up a manifold in which we can look at the behavior of these systems from the perspective of observers in relative motion. And what he found is that we can relate the content and medium of a manifold by the notion of space-time curvature. So we have a fixed manifold, a block universe, which can accommodate all these different perspectives on space and time, but no real coherence. Where do the laws of the universe come from? Why do they arise? Why is there a universe in the first place? And so where meaning is a linguistic attribution, no physical theory devoid of logic and language can explain A, the laws of physics, which are linguistic and logical in nature, or B, the meaning and connectivity of these laws and how they fulfill reality's intrinsic purpose. The CTMU combines language and geometry into a conspansive manifold, which evolves in coupling with its instances and thereby represents and relates the evolution and evolving meaning of the universe in real time, creating a reality self-simulation for observer participants, secondary images of God within reality, like humans. But what is, and this is the notion of the CTMU, but what does CTMU even mean? So that's what our next clip will talk about.
You came from.
And the CTMU is the cognitive theoretic model of the universe.
Cognitive theoretic model of the universe.
This is your theory of everything.
My theory of everything, and it's all in the name. If you take a good close look at that, you've got cognitive theory, and of course, a theory is a kind of language, theoretic language, okay? And then you've got cognitive theoretic model, you've got a model, and then you've got universe. You've got a language, you've got a universe, and then the model is the mapping between them. CTMU says those are all the same thing. All of those terms, all of those properties are distributed everywhere over reality. Reality can have only one structure once you realize that and you implement it in theoretical form.
So then the question I asked.
So The CTMU is a logico-geometric theory of everything, which couples language and their universe of discourse on a generic level to actualize a universe and a reality using the conspansive manifold, a multidimensional space encompassing all possible states of the universe, which is not only able to create the universe, but to explain and attribute meaning to itself and therefore to the universe. Basically, that is the purpose of the universe in the CTMU. So, the self-identification of ultimate reality. Reality needs something whereby to identify itself, and hence the universe, hence its physical extension. And then this next clip is about what the CTMU is really about.
But this is so important that you're not just talking about this siloed aspect of thought, or this, philosophy over here, language over here, math over here, physics over here, but you're presenting something that is universal.
Correct. Absolute and universal. To get the absolute invariance, the absolute truths of reality. Things that are true everywhere you go, no matter, at what time you exist or in what place you exist, it's the same.
The CTMU is a confluence of many fields: logic and language, physics, mathematics, and this harkens back to a classical worldview. For the ancient Greeks, who had a hell of a lot more to say about reality than modern academic philosophers, science, math, philosophy, theology, etc., weren't separate disciplines where you go and get your PhD in one and totally ignore everything else. No, there are different ways of viewing the same reality. And if there's one reality, then there's one reality theory. There's one way to describe reality. And the CTMU puts all those different disciplines together through its logical language. Where language and the universe are the same, the CTMU actually is the universe and can provide, if we're in terms of formal systems, and can provide insight into nearly every domain of thought. It is truly a theory of everything. Langan actually claims to have realized reality was a language in his early teens, meaning this kind of insight was bound, at least on the cognitive level of emergence, possibly in the late 1960s. And yet Langan and the CTMU are still canceled by nearly everyone, including seemingly the Daily Wire. But what does this overall theory of reality have to say about the big G, God? So that's what this next clip is.
And breadth here.
Mm-hmm.
If we're talking about a theory of everything, the first question we have to establish: does God exist?
Yes.
Simple as that.
Well, it's the identity has the reality has an identity. Okay, the identity is that as which something exists. Okay, matter of fact, when you say the word reality, you're naming an identity. You're identifying something.
I'm smiling because your answer on this is so beautiful. It just reminds me of Moses at the burning bush. And Moses at the burning bush says, "Who shall I tell the people that you are?" Talking to God. And God says, "Tell them I am that I am."
That's right.
I am identity itself. I'm being himself.
That's exactly right. That's what the CTMU says. It just comes up with the mathematical structure that you need to build a reality out of that. You see? So you come up with that identity and then you search it for its properties. You see, once you've built the preliminary framework, then you start deducing the properties of this identity, and you find out that those properties match those of God as described in most of the world's major religions.
Chris Langan says elsewhere that surprisingly much of what people think they know about God is correct. The God is absolute. God is the ultimate reality, more real in some ways than the physical world or anything in it. God is the creator God, omnipresent, omniscient, omnipotent, and omnibenevolent. God is a judge before whom all must stand eventually, he says. He is sentient or conscious in a higher sense than the most people can imagine, and knows our hearts and minds as well. As Langan says, God is the identity of reality. And he says in this interview, the identity is at that as which something exists, i.e. its metaphysical essence. Whatever you're pointing out, not only isness, but thisness. Therefore, God exists as the essential basis for reality and intelligibility. And as for the famous Exodus scene where God tells Moses, tell the Israelites, my name shall be I am that I am. God is a super tautology, just like truth itself. He is universal, closed, and consistent, distributed over all of existence as a pure and invariant being. This is a key CTMU concept. Like Knowles says, I am identity itself. I am being itself. On Quora, Langan wrote, God, best understood as ultimate reality, has super tautological structure, which implies certain properties which are consistent with the definitions of God which occur in major world religions like Christianity, Islam, and Judaism. Essentially, the logico-mathematical structure of the properties of the super tautology, qua ultimate reality, correspond to God. Chris Langan says God equates to the ultimate reality. And ultimate reality supports or contains the supporting syntax of consciousness. And this applies to ultimate reality itself. In other words, ultimate reality is consciousness, is conscious, and is consciousness. And God is essentially personal because we are his secondary images. We are his eyes and ears on this earth. He is projecting our being into us, and therefore we are all expressions of the same universal, pure, and invariant identity, who must be personal, at least in relation to us. It's not, whether the absolute is just a person, but whether the absolute has this personal aspect, whether God can actually enter into a relationship and projects his being into us, and therefore God is personal. There's something called the mu-morphic grammar, which attaches God to his secondary images. And at the end of this at this end of the mapping, at our personal end, God is personal, and yet at the other end remains pure and invariant. And God is defined on his ability to scale all of these levels of personal and impersonal existence. God configures as both ultimate reality and all of our own personal realities, therefore spanning all strata of personal and impersonal existence again. So, what is the role of humans in reality?
Personal relationship with God. We're images of God. You know what an image is? It's basically the product of a mapping. God maps himself into each human being, right? That's a very personal thing that God is doing for us, right? And I don't understand how anybody can say that it's any different. We reflect the structure of the universe. Each one of us, we're carried by it. Everything we do, we exist in a medium. What is that medium? Right? Where did it come from?
Yeah.
What holds it together? What is the unifying coherence, the source of coherence of that medium?
No.
As Langan said, we reflect the structure of the universe. We are a microcosm of God who exists, and we exist in a medium. And what the nature of that medium is a conspansive manifold. The infrastructure for the reality self-simulation, conspansive manifold, the medium in which we all exist, is generative in the sense that it is generated alongside its content. It's not this kind of empty shell in which you can fit anything in. So what is holding everything together, uniting everything towards a higher end, a seemingly divine purpose, renewing and fortifying the conspansive manifold, which reflects the structure and evolution, obviously, of ultimate reality itself, and allowing it to generate new axioms for its existence and evolution through its secondary tellers, is what they're called in the CTMU, these human sensor controllers who are placed here as secondary images of God. So human sensor controllers, as they're called in the CTMU, actually get around Gödel's undecidability theorem by pointing out that we, as secondary tellers within reality, or secondary images of ultimate reality in mathematical terms, are generating new axioms for the existence and evolution of the universe in the form of telons. Our intentionality, that's what a telon is actually shaping reality for good and for evil. So what is uniting all of these perspectives and axioms of sensor controllers across time to form an intelligible and consistent reality? And the answer is that what is required to do that is a constructive, creative intelligence far beyond the capacities we could circumscribe as beings absolutely contingent within it on its will and intentionality. Again, what is holding this entire creation together? The answer, of course, is God. So what precisely is the nature of this reality self-simulation?
That means that we are in God. Let me know how I've gone wrong. We are in God, and God is in us. And it is not merely that God and the creation are one and the same, but they are.
So the idea is that you've got the physical universe that you see around you, but God is not confined to the physical universe.
Okay.
See, there's an ordinary pantheist assumes that God is somehow confined to the universe. that there is just what we see around us, and God is in every piece of it. God is distributed over it.
Yeah.
Right? But it's a little bit more complex than that, because this part of the universe that we see around us cannot exist just by itself.
Yep.
Okay? There are certain things that it entails. And when you go into those entailments, that's how you get to God. That's how you get to the identity of reality. Okay? And now to get back to the reality of self-simulation, or at least that's what I call it, self-simulation. But to get back to the simulation hypothesis, that we're living in the display of that simulation. In addition to the display, there is also a processing aspect. Okay? And God, it captures both of those things. He captures both the display and the processor.
This is an example of how the CTMU again proves a very classical worldview, how our ancient ancestors might have thought of things, except in precise, logical, and mathematical terms. God is ultimate reality. God is that which unites the many, Langan says. God is the principle of consistency which binds the universe together. Creation is an overflowing of God's being and goodness. This is basically what the self-simulation is all about. The CTMU is the first viable theory of reality as a self-simulation, meaning the visible created world is just a veiled expression of the true metaphysical essence of reality, who is God. The creator and the creation are one. I and the Father are one. So the CTMU is not pantheist, meaning God is defined to be the universe, but rather panentheistic, which means all in God. Everything exists within God, who is existence. If you take the set of creative possibility, everything the universe is, was, or could be, and line that up with the creator himself, who embodies that space of infinite potential, what you'll end up with is you'll see that these are two sides of the same coin. This has a technical definition in the CTMU. Reality int equals reality xt. The internal aspect of ultimate reality is equivalent on an ontic level to its extension. Creator equals creation, or more fully, R equals R int slash Rx. Ultimate reality is a coupling of the creator and his creation, or the two aspects of the reality self-simulation, this world of design and potential, the non-terminal slash programming domain, and the world of actualization and instantiation, this display or terminal domain. This could also be thought of as the divide between matter and mind, or spirit, one being concrete and physical, the other uninstantiated pattern which seems to generate the universe as we know it. This as well harkens back to the classical worldview. You have a material world and a spirit world which make constant mutual contact to generate our reality, and whose coupling is the essential basis of ultimate reality. This is really what the CTMU is about, seeing the world through new eyes. So now what we're looking at is not just what reality consists of, physically, matter, energy, etc., but what's behind that, this deep reality, how our ancestors saw it. The earth is alive, reality is alive, a world of magic and beauty which is totally lost on the eyes of modern atheistic materialism. It's still there. We just can't see it. And yet the CTMU does not return humanity to the dark ages of ancient superstition, but instead imbues the classical worldview with deep logico-mathematical structure. We are living in the display of a reality self-simulation of which the deep structure is not visible. God is both the universe and its essential basis. This is what the classical theists were trying to tell us. As St. Thomas Aquinas said, God is ipsum esse subsistens, the sheer act of being itself. And for being ultimate reality to fortify and renew its identity, it must create this self-simulation, because it is not a static manifold which can exist on its own, but a conspansive manifold whose existence is becoming. It creates the world and then attributes existence to itself. It's a big closed loop where everything flows back to the almighty creator. In the words of Schelling, from the chalice of this realm of spirits foams forth to God his own infinitude. The ultimate question of concern to each of us is, do we have free will, or are we free?
To me, we have to tackle the question, do we really do much of anything at all, in the sense, do we have free will?
Yes, we do. Okay.
Well, I'm glad to hear it. I always thought we did.
Well, yes, we have to have free will. Oh, I was discussing with you earlier the idea of a fixed array. Okay?
Yeah.
All right, now modern physics know basically what you've got is you've got a bunch of quantum fields in superposition, and then those fields consist of little fluctuations, little quantum fluctuations, right? Where is the fixed array? We were talking about a manifold, right, with a bunch of zero-dimensional points.
Yep.
Okay? Those two things are not compatible. Okay? Quantum field theory and that fixed array manifold where you can parameterize all of the causal functions using the manifold, that doesn't work.
Free will is necessary because there is no fixed array where everything is caused by something else. Reality is actually self-determining, and we, because we are because we are secondary images of ultimate reality, are actually generating new axioms by which the universe evolves. Kurt Gödel proved that we could never have a fixed set of axioms that determines everything, even in a formal system as simple as arithmetic, the stuff we teach to elementary students, never mind reality. It actually takes a lot of work to determine the evolution of reality, and this means everywhere that reality must respond to freely changing internal conditions, meaning it has to have this generic kind of consciousness and will as its essential basis. And that's actually what reality is made of: telesis, a combination of energy and information, but also mind and will. Not everything is determined from the top down. It's generated on both the minimal and maximal scales of reality. What it's made of is actually the potential for possible futures. It's a potential nucleating itself to derive utility from the universal identity operator, who is ultimate reality. We, as secondary images or secondary tellers of God, factorize our telesis through our free will and can generate timelines based on our private goals or ends. As Langan writes in his paper, The Mathematical and Metaphysical Basis of Choice, Purpose, and Free Will, the universe has now been solved. We are among the angels and demons who, by leave of God, shape reality for good or evil through cognition and telesis, mind and will. I show you this for love of self, that you may save yourselves and each other. And I tell you this, there are none so blind as those who will not see, nor so lame as those who will not stand. This is starting to sound crazy enough from the perspective of the standards of Marxist, materialist, atheist academics. So let's lean into it. This is a phenomenon which has been observed by many over the years. What does the CTMU have to say about UFOs, unidentified flying objects, and whether they are of alien origin potentially?
Because I'm pretty confident that demons exist. I'm less confident that aliens exist.
Well, but the thing is, a lot of people are reporting that they're seeing these UFOs and
The tic
other
tac.
strange alien suggestive phenomena.
So what is something like they call it the tic tac of these weird UFOs that seem to violate the laws of physics?
Correct. Basically, they look like little blobs of light or spheres that can commit these maneuvers that are totally against the laws of physics as we understand them. Right? They look like they have mass, but somehow they're not subject to inertia. They can turn on a dime on a right angle and continue at the same speed. They can accelerate at a tremendous with tremendous G forces. Okay, how can that happen?
Do you have any theory?
Well, yes, I do. But it's it's fairly involved. Basically, when you reduce the world to telesis, you understand that reality consists of a merging of mind and matter. It's an interplay, of the two.
It's not just stuff, and it's not just pure abstraction.
It can be real without necessarily being a completely physical phenomenon. Okay? In other words, there can be a mental component to it. Right? And that is what I think is happening here. I think that there's something to it. The number of people that report UFO incidents is simply too large. People aren't, they're not all liars. They don't run around risking their reputations by saying, okay, I'm going to make a nut out of myself and say, these UFOs exist.
But couldn't they just be nuts?
Well,
As Langan explains, this kind of perspective on UFOs seems to require a more inclusive view of reality and how it operates than standard mechanistic materialism. So you need to make adjustments to your worldview metaphysically to accommodate UFOs. My guest on my podcast, Reality Principle, Harrison Cayley, explained that this is a rough quotation, that this is where the CTMU would come into play, because some of the ideas or extensions of the ideas go beyond the standard mechanistic worldview. We need to make room in our minds and worldview for what you might call consciousness in a manner that is not accepted or discussed in the standard materialistic framework. So we have to turn things around. And I believe The CTMU is excellent for fully integrating consciousness, cognition, and experience into the nature of reality. To understand reality, you can't ignore the fundamental mental component at a very basic level. Physical reality depends on it. This is the starting point for a worldview that can encompass the UFO or UAP phenomenon and non-human intelligence, which is likely far more complex than merely another species from another planet visiting Earth. The data within ufology doesn't seem to support the simple explanation that these phenomena are just extraterrestrial visitors. Whether you start examining UFO histories in the 1940s or even earlier in the 1890s. Some ufologists argue, he said, that this phenomenon has been a part of human history from the beginning, representing a fundamental aspect of our reality that we have yet to understand. I believe that much of what we're encountering could be considered a physical manifestation of a higher level evil. This aligns with Chris Langan's view on object-observer couplings, emphasizing that what is observed may not be a solely physical thing, but requires a broader and more inclusive perspective. Carl Jung also explored the psychological substrate of reality and its role in shaping our encounters with phenomena like UFOs, suggesting it's not solely psychological. Keel's perspective suggests that while UFO phenomena may have hallucinatory elements, there's an underlying objective phenomena that influences these perceptions. Building on this, a more radical idea could be that the human consciousness shapes the objective form of these content and phenomena to some extent, making them both real and influenced by perception. This might apply not only to the craft, but also to the entities associated with them, potentially explaining their malleability in various situations. So this is why you should understand Langan says that UFOs must be treated not only as objects, but as object-observer couplings. This is what he means. Langan is articulating truths despite being arguably the smartest man in the world, and certainly the one with the most sophisticated worldview, with which midwits like Richard Dawkins or Sam Harris would say is characteristic of those stupider than them, that they're really just old superstition like God, free will, the devil, any spiritual reality in the universe which goes beyond matter and energy. And Langan proves them to be true, actually. So Michael Knowles shares a relevant meme that he came across here, which I'll play.
Well,
Or at least we're perceived.
Right. No, there's a great meme that I'm really taken with. It actually has to do with IQ, which is a nice coincidence. But I love this meme because it's got the really stupid guy at the one end of the bell curve, and he's sort of drooling, and he says, "Duh, all the bad stuff is because of the devil." Right? And then you get up on the bell curve into, I don't know, say IQ of 120 or 130. And it's the really smart guy, the egghead with the glasses. And he says,
that's just the start of the danger zone.
Yeah, the danger zone is when you're just smart enough, but not smart. And those guys, they say, no, actually, the devil doesn't exist. And actually, we're all just sort of bags of chemicals. And no, it's all rationally explainable. And blah, 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 blah. And then you get up to the guy at the really high end of the IQ curve in this meme. And he says, no, actually, the bad stuff's just from the devil. And he agrees with the guy at the other end of the but it strikes me that there's really something to that. Roger Scruton, the late conservative philosopher, he said that the job of the conservative intellectual is to articulate things that the common man knows intuitively.
This meme illustrates that Langan is actually proving a popular worldview which can offer real meaning for people's lives and repudiate smug midwits who seek to deny the existence of logically ascertainable facts. As we all know and have been taught by our capitalist overlords, money and economics and finance is what really matters, not meaning or God or spirit, obviously. So what does Langan have to say about economics? It's not going to be about how we can improve our GDP.
Everything.
Well, now here we get, into the CTMU. We all know about the monetary economy, right? You get money, you buy things, you increase your wealth. The economy is actually telic. It's a vast favor bank. I do for you, you do for me. This is actually the trading system that exists in nature.
Can you define the word telic?
Yes, telesis, it means it's a fundamental, it's the mnemonic substance of which everything else is composed.
Okay.
Okay? In other words,
I think
some people, a physicist says, well, that's energy. Energy is the basic substance of which everything is mass energy.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I'm saying, no, you've got to go up a step. You need something more general with other properties that, for instance, accommodate information.
Okay.
You need something more general than energy to explain that. Or if you want to, you can play a little semantic game and then gradually expand the definition of energy so that it takes everything in, right? But I call the ultimate extension of that telesis.
Okay.
Basically, it's a fundamental form of intentionality. And if you want to talk about the intentionality of God, then you're talking about a dirty word in academia. And what is that? Teleology. Okay? The will of God.
Right.
Yeah.
The things have a purpose.
That's correct.
Yes. And so you're saying that there is this telic aspect to the economy too. We're not just...
that is fundamentally the only aspect, okay? Money is an abstraction of that. It's a very specified, controllable, physically commoditized version of telesis, okay? And you have a certain, group, a certain crowd that has established a monopoly on that. Now, when you establish a monopoly on money, you're actually monopolizing the telic economy as well. How? People invest their telesis in what can make them money, okay?
Right.
Unless you're like me and you prefer meaning in your life, okay? Truth, all right? That's what telesis is. It encompasses not just money, but truth and meaning.
Langan contrasts the telic economy, which is this vast favor bank, the metaphysical essence, you could say, of all human relationships and organization, with the monetary economy, where you're issued a certain amount of fiat currency, which ostensibly represents this telesis, this general mind and will, which can be exchanged for goods or services or held as a store of value. But the monetary economy is controlled and has been for at least the last few centuries by money changers, by these central bankers who are monopolizing the entire money supply and therefore sucking up all human utility unto themselves. This is Langan's idea of parasitic divergence, that there is a group of these bankers who control international finance and have intelligently organized economies, governments, and systems of control such that more power and money gravitates towards them, and they no longer have any reason to make common cause with the rest of humanity. They're basically a vast parasite who are destroying the true economy, the metaphysical economy, which, regardless of what the S&P 500 or GDP statistics say, is actually in a state of peril. Basically, all of that utility, all of that telesis is concentrated in the hands of a parasitic overclass, in their potentates and sycophants, like those that control multinational corporations, governments, and international financial and political institutions. The problem is this voids the purpose of human life, which is to co-evolve with God as individuals and as a society in a way advantageous to ultimate reality. When all people care about is making some money, people invest their telesis, their mind, and their will into money. This is how the common saying goes: pay attention. This commoditizes the world. Everything is like a little video game where the reward is these Federal Reserve notes, and the more you play, the more they control you. You might think that you're rich, but the more utility you're providing to this system, the more you are a slave to it. And now they're trying to make a central bank digital currency and digital ID, and everything will be in a physical in a Facebook metaverse, a non-physical, just this tech world where we don't even need physical reality anymore. They can track and control you, and you'll basically have lost your autonomy and freedom and no longer be human in any real sense. At that point, the systems of control will be all pervasive that it'll be like you're living in the Matrix, just living batteries for the machine. This is what they want to do to the human race. We can't let this pass. As you should be able to ascertain by now, it is satanic. It is a literal negation of the purpose of reality. And that might explain why they hate beauty so much, is because they hate reality, and reality is a beautiful, intentional creation of God.
Beauty is that they're not in touch with truth.
But I thought I was told by all my modern teachers that beauty is in the eye of the beholder. It's a subjective thing, and it's not objective.
It is, but unfortunately, some beholders leave something to be desired in their aesthetic sense.
You're saying there is an objective standard.
Yes, absolutely. Is it consistent with teleology or is it not? Right? Obviously, basically you've got this identity, God, who is perfection. Anything that deviates from that cannot, by definition, be good or beautiful. Okay? Now, nature experiments. I mean, it goes from one thing to another and tries certain things out. But once it becomes evident that something isn't working, then it's not consistent with teleology. Once it proves to be degenerate and causes people to become demoralized and sick of life, then we have to do away with it.
What we're seeing right now with the assault on beauty in our culture is a rebellion against God, which is equal to a rebellion against the transcendentals, truth, goodness, beauty, love. And are there any things, concepts more subject to vitriolic and relentless cancellation? No one is hated more than one who speaks the truth, who is truly beautiful, who has true goodness, not in the superficial sense of, that person's very, very beautiful, but it is actually bringing out this beauty. That look what they're trying to do to Western countries, import millions of illegal immigrants, say that our entire history is nothing but evil and terrible, when in fact nothing could be further from the truth. These are civilizations of high culture and beauty, and it's a terrible thing to do away with those. Look at a city nowadays, even cities, they used to call San Francisco the Paris of California or something. And you look at a city like that nowadays, and it's ugly. You have crime and trash on the streets. You'll see billboards everywhere, ugly offices. The people aren't the prettiest either. This is monopoly capitalism. This is what happens when you let everything be controlled by a handful of self-interested no-goods who don't care about beauty or goodness. You see this in the 20th century too. Monopoly capitalism and communism were both financed by the central bankers and both led independently to parasitic divergences in their respective, economies and societies. And this is why in the US, as well as in Soviet Russia, you see these drab and Soviet style buildings everywhere. It's the death of God and the death of beauty. Why can't we build cathedrals and palaces like we did in ancient Europe? It's not because of technical ability. We have architects and city planners and cranes and civil engineers, but it's because we don't believe what they did. We don't have this vision for the logos of beauty that transcends time. Building a Gothic cathedral took at least half of a century, and yet in our modern world you couldn't go and raise capital for a building that will be built in 25-23. And even if you could, 50 years down the line, it'll probably be scrapped and turned into an office park or a strip mall. Make no mistake, the sense of beauty and the sacred equals teleology. Beauty equals coherence, something that coherence and beauty cannot deviate from the will of God, because God is perfection. It can't deviate from that and still be beautiful. In the words of Chris Langan, the beauty, truth, and perfection of God are limitless. And like he said, if it causes people to become demoralized and sick of life, then it's not beautiful. Should we strive for meaning or money in our lives? You have to really consider this. And so,
out of people who have a lot of it.
If you'd had the connections, would you have striven to make money?
Not at the expense of truth. No, I'd have gone after meaning first. Now, I used to think that, it should be possible in theory to go after both. And then I discovered that wasn't necessarily true. Yep. If you go after truth too hard, then you're going to make a bad impression on mammon, on the people with all the money, and eventually you're going to be canceled out of any sort of comfortable life.
And there's also just a time issue, right? I mean, if you dedicate yourself to, I don't know, doing spreadsheets or something, you're probably not going to have a ton of time to pursue truth. Or am I wrong about that? Am I just underestimating?
You're absolutely right. Eventually that's what you become. We are what we do, more or less. So you've got to make up your mind what you want to spend your time doing. And I consider it to be better to seek truth and meaning and God than it is to pursue money. Now, who agrees with me these days? Not many.
I'd like to have it all, but I certainly
Well,
agree
I
with
would
you.
like to bring mankind back to the point where we care about those things again.
Because
chase meaning instead of money. A simple message, yet if fully internalized by a critical mass, would absolutely and utterly transform our world. As Jesus Christ said in the Gospel of Matthew in the Sermon on the Mount, "Do not store up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moths and vermin destroy and where thieves break in and steal. But store up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where moths and vermin do not destroy and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The true metaphysical commodity is meaning, not money, not mammon's god of accumulation and subversive success. You can lose your soul. Jesus continues, the eye of the the eye is the lamp of the body. If your eyes are healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eyes are unhealthy, your whole body will be full of darkness. If the light within you is darkness, how great is that darkness? No one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and mammon. You cannot serve both God and money. This is the ultimate message of the CTMU on a personal level. Store up your treasure in heaven, not on earth. Even if you accumulate and hoard, you have this big tech IPO and you think you're the shit, you have $100 billion. You can't bring it with you. So I'll end with these final parting words from Langan, his message to you personally, not to the people listening, because that's at the one end of that mapping. But this is a message to you. This is a message to the viewer. Take this into your life and allow it to enter into your heart and transform your life, your soul, your mind, and truly commit yourself to this. Attach yourself to God.
Recognizing what they are.
Before I let you go, as we sit here in the clouds, in some simulation of the clouds here, before I let you go, people are going to be asking, so what do I do? What should I do right now? Assuming we're not going to launch the Second American Revolution or anything like that. What should I do in my own life? Even maybe beyond any political question.
Search for God. Ask God to establish a personal relationship with you. It's available. You're attached to God by your soul. Okay, there's this soul that attaches you to God. You can receive the will of God into yourself, and to some extent the power of God into yourself, but you've got to be receptive. If you're not receptive, then you're cutting yourself off from God. Okay, and once you do that, then you do not share the identity of reality itself, and you're done. Once your physical body expires, there is nothing that will carry you because you have denied it and rejected it. Follow me?
I do.
That's what people need to do.
I do. I think that's good advice.
I'm glad you agree.
Chris.
That's good for you.
It is. It's good. It's sort of like reaching out and grabbing. Do this. Do that. Search for God. So as though to shake the audience. Chris, this has been a true pleasure. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for making the trek.
Well, it's been my pleasure. I don't travel very often. You know, I've told you the reasons for that.
Yeah.
Right? But I'm glad I made this trip, Michael.
Thank you, Chris.
Langan's wife, Dr. Gina Langan, wrote a prayer based on her and Chris's experience with the Daily Wire and cancel culture in general, which Chris has faced, saying, "Dear God, give me the strength to always be in that small percent that will do what's right and not bend to the will of the system. Help me to manifest the discernment I need to peel back the masks of the demons. Let me always remember to lend a hand to lift those around me and to be open and able to be lifted by them. God bless us all and keep us safe and strong for the struggles ahead. Amen. Let the light shine forth in the darkness. May the peace of our Father in heaven be upon you." Like and subscribe. Peace. You can go to megafoundation.substack.com to subscribe to the Mega Foundation, Chris and his wife, Dr. Gina Langan's organization, Teleologic newsletter, and chrislangan.substack.com to subscribe to Chris Langan's Ultimate Reality. That is the most important thing you can do right now, this minute, for the CTMU movement. Both will, as always, be linked in the description. Take care.